Welcome back to Publishing Power. My name is Joellen, and we have co-host today with us, Kristena Stanley from Fictionary. Hi, Kristena.
Hi, Joellen. Great to be back again this week.
Yeah, we're working our way through the scenes. We've done a lot of bit of work there, deciding what the names are and making sure that we have a purpose within each of those scenes. But this week, we're actually going to cover two of the story elements in one, and that is the closing and the opening of every scene. So Kristena, walk us through this and tell us what we're looking for and what we need to do to improve our writing.
Okay, so this is an interesting one for me. It has a very personal history of when I wrote my first draft, and my husband mentioned I started every scene in the same way, and I thought, no, I don't. And then I went back and read my first draft and went, yes, I do. And I had to figure out how to not do that. And so for both opening and closing types, you can start a scene with dialogue, you can start a scene with thought, with action, or description. And description includes narrative. So that's it. There is no other choice. And it's easy as a writer to get into habits and use one too much over the other, or to use these inappropriately for your genre. So we're going to talk about that a little bit.
Okay, tell us more. Tell us more.
Okay, so if you open every scene with dialogue, it's repetitive and the reader won't understand why it's a bit dull, but it is. And so what we're looking for is that there's a balance. And so if you're writing a very character-driven story, and that's your genre, having more scenes open in dialogue and thought than in action and description, that's fine. If you're writing a thriller, you probably want more scenes to open in dialogue and action and do fewer in thought and description. So you need to know your genre and what a reader is expecting for that, and then use those appropriately.
Okay, because I mean, those are examples there. Well, we're giving the description or having somebody actually saying something. I never really thought about that before I went through all this. Of course, you know, as an editor, you're doing that all the time, but to evaluate every single scene is so important because you do have that repetition and sometimes it's not quite clear. How about when we're closing out the scenes? How does that work?
Okay, so just before we get there, I want to do that, but I want to just talk about what dialogue, thought, action, and description are, because I get asked that question a lot. And it's very important to know how to tag this scene, and you're going to go through your story and you're going to tag each one and keep a record of how many you use of each and in what order. So for dialogue, so here's the example. Don't touch my dog, Susan said. Right. Or Susan said, don't touch my dog. So even though the second example starts with Susan said, the first line is still considered dialogue. So one or the other, and sometimes people don't quite get that little distinction, but that is all dialogue. So for thought, here's an example. Since Lance didn't like personal messages left on his cell, Shannon wrote a note telling him where she was headed for the weekend. So the introductory clause is in the character's head. She's thinking about Lance. And so that's a thought. Sometimes writers highlight thoughts in italics. There'll be a she thought, so it's obvious. But something like this is a little less obvious. So you need to pay attention to what's in the character's head versus describing something.
Right, right. That makes sense.
So for description, the sun rose over the Atlantic and the low angled rays bounced off capping waves. So that's clearly describing the ocean, and that falls under description. And then action, Jack scrambled forward and pulled Shannon's tether. So that's Jack scrambling. So he's performing an action, so that falls under action. And that's how you distinguish between the four types, and whether it's opening the scene or ending the scene, those you choose in that same way.
Okay. So it's pretty much the same. Now, what about if we have the scene opening and closing in both action? Is it better to balance it out within each scene? Does that matter?
No, and here's where sometimes you might need a professional editor to help you with that nuance. If you did every scene starts and ends with action, action, dialogue, dialogue, thought, thought, it might, but you need someone else to read it to see if that is the case. Lots of scenes can start with action and end with action, or start with dialogue and end with dialogue, and it's perfectly fine.
Okay, so there's not much difference there. So basically we're looking through these four elements, or these four different variations, and then we're going to look at both the intro and the outro, the beginning and the end of each scene, to make sure that we have variety in there and it's appropriate to our genre.
Right, and so the action, this week's action is You want to look at every scene opening and every scene closing type, and you want to keep track of it. So you need a method to keep track so that you can count up how many times you use each of the four and what order you're using them. Because maybe you have a balance, but maybe the first quarter of the novel is all dialogue and the second quarter is all action. And that won't work either. So there needs to be a bit of a flow between them throughout the story.
Right.
And again, it means you have to go through your entire story and look at these things and evaluate it.
Right. And of course, we use Fictionary in both as editors and writers to do that if you're wondering. But again, we're just giving you the information today and want to make sure that you know how to address all those important elements that go through fiction writing to make it successful and to attract the best readers, to be honest. So again, thank you for joining us again this week, Kristena. It's brilliant. And I wish everyone good luck in going through all of their scenes again this week.
Okay. And thanks to everyone out there who's doing all their homework. It's really going to help you. And we'll see you next week.
Good luck.